You're listening to the Be Who You Came to Be podcast. I'm your host, Renze. I gotta tell you, I've got a really cool guest today. Welcome to the show, Zoe Asher. That was a word scramble. Welcome to the show, Zoe Asher. Say it 5 times in a row.
I know how to say it 5 times fast, but I'll tell you what, it is hard for some people. The whole name in general just intimidates. They're like, what? Zoe Asher? What does that even mean? Is it a brand? Nope, it's just me, girl. I'm happy to be here.
I love your name. I think it's so cool, so hip, so pretty. It's just beautiful, just like you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tara. You know, the name actually is a really important piece of this to me because my name, Zoe, means new life, and Asher means blessed and happy. So literally, I try and make that my personality, a blessed and happy new life running around.
You are a blessed and new happy life running around, but you've been running around my life for 4 years. When we first met, we were at a Dave Ramsey event, literally right before the second wave of the pandemic hit, and I think everyone there got COVID.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes.
I totally did too. I think it's so funny that we can laugh about it now, but I remember at the time I was like, don't tell anyone that we got COVID.
Right. We are dying.
Yeah.
And we must die in silence. Yeah.
I did have 2 really fun days on Broadway after the Dave Ramsey event, but it was when I got home, I was like, ooh, something is. At first, I just thought I was extremely hungover. And then I was like, this is more than a hangover. And it was the first time I had COVID. I actually wasn't that bad, but I wasn't well, but I wasn't like worried.
Yeah. You know, how good is it that is so far in the past now?
Oh.
Please.
Well, we're here today to talk about relationships, and that was one thing that really has significantly impacted relationships in our country with different generations is what happened during that pandemic, people being alone, people scared to gather together. And for so many people, it was such a critical time in their lives that really fundamentally changed how they approach relationships. So Zoe is a relationship expert. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you stumbled upon this, how you became an expert? And you know, we've got so many important things to talk about today.
So thank you for giving me this opportunity, Tara, because I think it's such an interesting situation we're in because we're obviously in post-COVID and the CDC has said that we are in the midst of a loneliness epidemic. Not only that, they have said that the impacts of loneliness on our body is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Oh, geez.
Couple that with if you were having a conversation with someone saying, are you lonely? They'd say, no, because we don't want to admit we're lonely because it seems like a stigma. But the reality is loneliness is a signal that we're craving connection. And so my story began in college. I was a sophomore at the time, and I had a best friend breakup. Okay. And women know best friend breakups are like cataclysmic. Okay. Like people are taking sides. Yeah. It's a whole thing. It is the worst.
It feels like a breakup. Like I had a friendship breakup in my like early 40s, and I'm not kidding. Like the pit in the stomach. I was like, I haven't felt like this since my high school boyfriend broke up with me.
No, exactly. Because that women want to build such deep relationships and friendships right from the very beginning that it's like you just go there. And then it's just like, so you just took my whole life and up and left. So basically I was put in this position because that was my only friend. Like I literally only invested in one person. That person was gone. Now I have nothing. So I fell into a deep bout of depression. Months on end. I didn't even want to leave my dorm room. I didn't want to look anybody in the eye. I couldn't do it. And around this time, it was about to be New Year's. So I just woke up one morning and looked myself in the mirror and said, I don't want to be lonely anymore. And I knew that when I made that statement, I had to back it up with action. So I decided to create a New Year's resolution to eat a meal with someone different on my college campus every single day and get to know their story. And the reason I did this was twofold. One, I ultimately wanted to be less lonely, but because of the hopelessness I felt, my hypothesis was if I get a meal with somebody else and get to learn about them and focus on them, it's actually going to give me hope, because I'm going to be spending time with people and putting the attention on curiosity and truly building a friendship, and it's going to give me the courage. And all of that ended up being true. My
Right.
hypothesis was correct. And that ended up going through my senior year. I got over 250 meal dates with strangers on my college campus who turned into friends. And that transformed my whole life and was the genesis for this being my life passion and mission for other people to build these meaningful friendships too as adults.
So you would go to the cafeteria and be like, is anybody sitting here? And were people freaked out? Were some people like, I'm not having a conversation?
So I did a little prep beforehand. I would use people in my classes. So perfect example, there would be someone sitting next to me in a comms class, and I'd be like, Erica, first off, I love your outfit. You are like a fashion icon.
Perfect. Compliment first. Everybody
Exactly.
likes that.
Yes. And then I said, but that's honestly like all I know about you. Would you be willing to grab lunch so I can get to know you more? And it sounds like, oh, so awkward. But guess what never happened? Not one person said, no, because
So
everyone
you
wants to
just
feel like
didn't
they
go in
matter.
cold to the cafeteria with your tray and sit down next to people, or did you eventually?
I would get to that point. Yeah. Yeah. But
Okay,
it
well,
started
I
with
love
like, who
this.
do I just know the names of? Yeah.
Right.
And that's where I'd
Okay.
start.
Oh my gosh. Well, good for you. I think this is so interesting because I am Gen X, um, born 1977. And, you know, it's just a completely different generation of like
Right.
how we were raised. We had no technology. So if you like, there was no hiding behind a screen. Um, we just talked to people. Like we made friends easily. I grew up in a small town and people were like, "Oh my gosh, how was that? Was it clicky?" And I was like, "Well, this small town was actually so small that
Mm.
you were friends with everyone. Like the football, the quarterback was also friends with the like lead trombone player in the band.
Okay.
Actually the
Yeah.
quarterback probably also played in the band. Like there was no like these are the nerdy kids, these are the cool kids. Like everybody was just friends. And I think
Love
because
it.
growing up in this small town, I naturally just grew up with this like, I mean, everybody waves at each other when they drive by. Everyone talks. Like it's so I've never had a hard time making friends. And I will say, I've got two boys. They're 15, almost 16 and 17. They'll be a junior, or I'll have a sophomore and a senior next year. And I think it's probably just by nature of who I am as a mother and how I raise them that they naturally make friends. I mean, my mom jokes, she's like, "Oh yeah, Ben and I'll go to brunch and Ben will strike up a conversation with the old couple next to him. Like just start talking to them."
What I think is interesting is hearing all about this is I think our definition of friendship has changed, especially post COVID,
Mhm.
because a lot of people are like, yeah, I have friends. It's like no big deal. But then when you ask them, define what a friend is to you, most people say someone who's there for me in the hard times, But there's also another study that revealed that 70% of Americans don't have a single person outside of a family member that they feel like they could call in the middle of a night crisis.
Oh,
So
interesting.
there's something happening where we're believing something, but are we actually truly acting on that if we're believing it? So there
Mhm.
seems to be this split happening. And I also think that definition of someone who's there for you when you need it is a short-sighted definition, because what about when you don't need it? What about when you want it? What about when you want someone to celebrate with you and actually do life with you? That's a
Right.
completely different definition of friendship. And I think we've fallen into this trap of settling for surface level relationships because ultimately I don't know if we believe that we're worth taking the risk to build that friendship we've always wanted.
And I think everyone is so different. So for me, I've got um I've got a lot of friends. I have a lot of acquaintances. I mean, Scott's like, I mean, Tara could go find someone to go out to dinner with every night if she wanted to.
I love it.
But I have like my ride or die, right? Or like
Yes.
a few people that are like super close to me. I
Right.
will say that circle has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller with every year that I age up.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I would consider like really good friends. Like how many, I only have a handful of friends, girlfriends, that I'd be like, let's go on a vacation together.
Yeah.
My husband, he has the same core group of friends that he's been friends with since college and high school. Like these guys are tight knit, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, it is a hard, like they are just a great group of friends. But Scott has some acquaintances in town, but he doesn't have like a group of people that he would consider like great friends of his in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't golf. And I think
Mm.
men are even different, especially if they don't golf. Like I feel like it's very hard for them to make friends. And now
Yeah.
what's interesting is my two sons are following the same trend. Like I was the youngest. My
Mm.
oldest son has a very tight knit group of friends. He's friends to a lot of people, but he has a very tight knit group. And then my youngest son Jack he's loved by everyone. He has a lot of friends.
Yeah, that seems to be an interesting split between men and women because women's relationships are centered around conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and men's are centered around activities as the bridge almost to the conversation. So I see that oftentimes. But going to what you said about your close knit group, that actually makes sense because there's this principle called the Dunbar principle, which basically explains our social cognitive limits. So in your tightest circle, that's called the core, you can only keep a max of 3 to 5 people in there at one time. And then the
Okay.
next circle out from that is a max of 12. Next circle out from that is 50. And then by that point, it's like at one time, you can maybe keep a relationship of acquaintanceship even to 150 people. So we do have those cognitive limits. And I always say that because there's someone out there who is like, yeah, I don't have like a ton of friends. It's not about the amount of friends, it's about the depth of the connection you have with people that is the most important aspect.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that we as a country are facing a loneliness pandemic, that people feel lonely. Is this a certain age group or does it spanning all gens?
Yeah, it's spanning across generations. And part of this loneliness epidemic obviously is coming on the heels of COVID, where everyone had to basically do what was completely unnatural and biologically incorrect by distancing ourselves from others. And we've made the discomfort of that become so comfortable that now thinking about needing to go out in public and spend time with somebody is a chore.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about it because isolation used to be a tactic for people who were prisoners. Like they would quarantine you away from
Right.
people as punishment. And
Right.
we are voluntarily doing this to ourselves nowadays.
Yes.
So it's crazy.
Well, and I think a lot of it probably was, who were you quarantined with? Were you by yourself? You know,
Right.
I was with the three people I love most of my life, which are my husband and my two boys. And so
Right.
we kind of look back on it and we're like, actually, we actually loved this. Like the four of us were together, we had dinner, we all get along. Like we have a very close relationship with our sons. My
Yeah.
mom, who lived by herself, you know, and she was at the age where they scared the daylights out of her, literally
Yeah.
scared the
Yeah.
daylight. She would not go out into daylight. Like she was quarantined for
Mm.
6 weeks, and out of fear that if she came over by us, even though we had been quarantined, that she would get sick.
Yeah.
And it really messed with her. It messed with her health. It messed with her psyche. I mean, and finally she was just like, I don't care anymore. I will take the risk. Like she got to the point where she was literally willing to risk her life to
Yeah.
come and see us. And
Yeah.
how sad is that?
It's so sad, and it was never supposed to be like that. And obviously everyone made the best decisions they could with the knowledge that they had at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is because we've already overcame it and we're on the other side. But you brought up a really interesting point that is paramount in all of this, and that's weighing the risk and the
Mm-hmm.
fears that hold us back. Because one of the biggest fears that adults across the board have nowadays is the fear of rejection. Or, and the fear of getting burned by another human again.
Right.
And I want to address the second one first because we've all been hurt badly by another human being. You haven't lived for more than 10 minutes if you haven't been, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the one person or the, let's say, handful or the group of people that burned us does not define the collective of humanity. And we're at a very chilling time where we can outsource our fears to robots. And that sounds insane, but yet we're doing it. Like, there's a rise of AI friendships because people are so scared that a human might hurt them again that they would rather share everything with a fake, artificial, piece of technology to feel safer. And we also have this fear of rejection that's holding us back when in reality, the only way to pursue and achieve anything you want in your life is on the other side of risk.
Right.
And knowing that, yes, I could get rejected again, but you know what else could happen? I could finally find the friendship that I've been searching and, quite frankly, maybe praying for my entire life. And I always love sharing this with people because people don't realize how insane our minds are when they're trying to protect us. We'll just make up any story. Stanford did this study on rejection. And the study was done basically in a way to study a human's perception of how likely they were to be rejected versus reality.
Oh, interesting.
Okay? And it's a really complex study, but the results of it are this. We are 1.5 times more likely to be accepted than we think we are. So we're the ones who are putting these lies in our heads that someone will reject us when we actually have scientific data to prove that is absolutely no longer the case.
Well, 80% of our thoughts every day are negative, are biased, repetitive, and untrue. So when I tell my audiences this, it shocks the hell out of people. They've never actually grown adults. I have conversations all the time with grown adults who say, I've never thought about this, that my thoughts are untrue, that they're lies, that they're not truths, that the mind is just triggering ideas and thoughts. And I always joke, I'm like, well, the mind will wake you up at 3 a.m. and be like, hey, let's talk about that cocktail party, in 2001 when you had too much to drink. And you're like,
yes,
why in the hell are you waking me up to tell me this? But that's just what the mind does. It's just a information. It just triggers information. It's like, I tell people, like, if you went and looked something up on the internet, you wouldn't automatically believe it. You would have to go do a little more research to make sure that it's actually true.
Yeah.
Same with your mind. Like, the mind is just firing thoughts. And what's happened is it has turned us into insecure, that we feel like we're not enough. We feel like we're rejected. We have this human need for acceptance that most people are so concerned about, that they're afraid to show up as their authentic self. They're afraid to be exactly who they came to be because this fear of rejection, of not being accepted, of, being burned, being rejected, all that goes into that. And so then we either recluse and hide, or we try to show up as someone that we're really not because we're trying to fit in versus truly finding those connections that matter.
Exactly. And that's why I love your message so much, Tara, of being who you came to be, because just like when you ask someone, what do you want? We rarely know what we want. I think we are at a very important time in history where we need to be asking ourselves, who am I meant to be? And how can I show up as that? Because we're so used to putting on masks, facades, filters, everything other than showing our true selves and our scars. The most freeing relationships in our lives are the ones where people know the worst parts of us and still choose to fully love us, see us, and know us while holding that knowledge. And so few people are willing to risk that because they think they're going to get rejected, when I've found, and I'm sure you found too, your whole mission is about authenticity. The more authentic you are, the more attractive you become to others.
Well, I found, even just through my speaking and talking to people, like, the more vulnerable I get and the stories that I'm more willing to share about myself, the more relatable I become. The more people are like, oh my God, I felt like this was just meant for me, versus, protecting or over rehearsing, or, instead it's just like, hey, I'm just going to show up as exactly who I am, my best self, and
Yeah.
hope that that inspires you to be who you came to be.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing is we can't have authentic connection and build friendships when we're some bullshit watered down version that's not truly who we are.
That's exactly right. Because there's this verse that I love in scripture that says, "What is hidden in the darkness will be brought into the light." And
Hmm.
to be honest, I make that a life principle. I would rather come forward and bring the light on my flaws instead of waiting for it to be brought to the surface.
Hmm.
But it really is a principle that applies in all of our life. Secrets destroy every form of relationship.
Hmm.
There is no secret that is going to, make a friendship flourish. It's going to come out at some point, and that's not to scare you as much to be like, why don't we choose to walk into those deep waters with someone else? Because when you are vulnerable and you go first, you give someone else the gift of going second. The amount, genuinely, it had to be 90% of the time, Tara, whenever I did those meal dates in college, this was where the conversation changed. This was a pivotal moment. I would tell someone, I am really struggling in life right now. I'm going through it, an unforeseen circumstance. I feel lonely. I feel hopeless. Has there been a time in your life where you felt hopeless and you didn't know what to do? And what did you do? And how did you overcome it?
Hmm.
Now, that shifted the conversation unknowingly. This wasn't even, I wasn't even trying to, but I found that because I chose to be vulnerable, other people wanted to match that vulnerability
Hmm.
and also walk alongside me because I had kind of exposed like this is what I'm going through. And I actually think sharing what's really going on in your life is a gift to other people. Now, there's a line. You can be the Debbie Downer of the group, the toxic person who's a literal drain for
Right.
people. Now, nobody wants that. Nobody wants a friend who's constantly a victim
Right.
around them. But you can be going through something hard and feel hopeless. And to be honest with you, right now, presently, I am in the hardest season of my life. I have gone through a betrayal, I have gone through a rejection, but you know what? That is not the whole of humanity. So I'm actually adamant about living out what I'm preaching to other people because I still believe that I'm worth building rich, meaningful friendships and that I am capable of finding other people who want the same. And
Hmm.
so it all goes back to this concept of how willing are we to go first, stop waiting for other people to approach us, schedule things, be vulnerable with you, and first embody and become the friend that we're actually looking for.
Right.
Because when you become the friend you're looking for, you're going to find that friend you're looking for because that's what they want too.
Right. So how much of this goes back to how you were raised? I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like Scott and I are both outgoing. What's really interesting is I used to be the one in our marriage who was like, I'll go to the mixer, I'll go to the whatever it is. And then, I lost my dad unexpectedly when I was about 37 years old.
Yeah.
And that break relationship, he
Mm.
died unexpectedly, fundamentally changed my life because he was the guy who like, how you said like someone accepts you fully for exactly who you are. I was like, oh my God, I will
Yeah.
never have a man like this in my life again because it was my
Mm-hmm.
dad and he loved me unconditionally
Yeah.
from the day I was born. He knew all of everything bad that I had ever done. Like
Yeah.
I mean, and so I became incredibly reclusive, which I guess probably forced Scott to go start being the guy who would go out and do the
Yeah.
things. And that was in 2015. And then I kind of started to get out of my shell a couple years later. But then when the pandemic hit, I was like, sweet, I don't have to socialize at all. And I became incredibly reclusive. I mean, I went from the
Yeah.
person who hosted parties and did a ton of stuff to being like, I would be like, oh, we could have a friend, we could have someone over for dinner, but like, I didn't want to host the big parties and do all the things. And I, to this day, get social anxiety. I mean, people do, they're like, I can't believe that you get social anxiety. I can go speak on a keynote stage and talk to people afterwards all day long
Yep.
about who they are, what they're up to, But if you ask me to go to like a mom's night mixer where I have to go make friends with moms in the school, I am terrified.
Yeah. No, I completely relate to that, Tara, because I used to be like Miss Extroverted, and people will be shocked to know that I am 100% an introvert now. And people are like, what? How can this even? And I have social anxiety. In fact, I'm actually releasing an episode this week on my channel about how I have learned to curb my social anxiety in situations. And
How do you
I
do
think
that?
that's, well,
Wine?
my number,
Weed? Like
I'm dead. My number one tip is to get into a one-on-one dialogue with somebody, because the
okay.
reason we get in social anxiety, we're getting social anxiety, I believe, is because we're like, what do people know about me and who do I need to show up to each person? Because we all shift a little bit of who
Mhm.
we are based on the people we're around. Now, obviously, if you're two-faced, that's not what we're talking about. But we get overwhelmed because we're like, who should I talk to? What should we talk about? But if you can get in a one-on-one conversation with somebody and you are genuinely curious about the person, you come in with a different goal. The goal isn't, I need to make a friend by the end of the night. I need to have a good time. It's not even that. The goal is, I want to connect with one person, and therefore your nerves go down because you're like, okay, that's fine. There's no like there's no high stakes here because
Right.
it's dependent on me. It's not dependent on if anyone else chooses to come talk to me, if I'm feeling awkward. And by the way, let me just nail this lie on the head right now. The amount of people, well, I'll just say it like this. Every time I speak at an event, I ask the room who in the room feels awkward when they meet new people. Every single hand goes up.
I'm
So,
sure. I mean, there are probably a few people who are like just so extroverted that they don't, but
yeah.
I become like a stage 3 clinger at these events because I look for the one person I know and then I'm like, it's so I'm like, what is wrong with me?
No, there's nothing wrong with you. You're trying to stabilize yourself in these situations. But the reason I say that is because we all believe we're awkward when meeting new people, but here's the actual truth. You're not awkward. The circumstance is awkward.
Okay.
We're all feeling the exact same thing together. So let's throw off the lie that we believe that we are different, we are awkward, nobody can relate to us, and nobody can see that. Because, I mean, if we're wired to protect ourselves, and
Mhm.
that's how we were created and back in tribes, then putting yourself in a situation where you don't know the person in front of you, your brain is doing a whole lot. Your brain is trying to analyze, is this person trustworthy? If they're crossing their arms, maybe not. Are they making eye contact with me? Can I see their hands? Are they exposing that they're like actually safe? We're doing all these calculations, which is why our brains are like fried as we're going into it. But that's okay because we're each feeling that together. So I actually think those are opportunities for connection. And
Right.
when I meet new people, I'll say, hey, I just want to cut the awkwardness from the beginning. I'm Zoe. I love your glasses. Like, how are you doing today? And then I'll get into a dialogue about that because we overthink to the point that we stop acting at all.
Right.
One of the hottest topics that people ask me about is, how do I have a meaningful conversation with somebody? And the key is, be intensely curious about the other person. If you actually aren't curious about them, then no wonder the conversation is going to fall flat and going to stay up here,
Right.
because nobody wants a surface conversation. We all want to feel like we are fully known, fully seen, and that we matter. So if you can get into a conversation with somebody and, like, for instance, my favorite thing to do when I'm talking to college kids, what's your major?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What made you get into that? What's your dream job? Wow, tell me more about that. The way people's eyes light up when you could hit on their passions, I mean,
Mhm.
it changes the dynamic entirely. And I think we have neglected the art of being intensely curious about other people. And I mean, who doesn't love doing a podcast recording? Because someone cares about what you have to say, right? It's an
Right.
opportunity to make someone feel like they matter, but you don't need a podcast to do that. What you need is two eyeballs looking at someone intently with a smile on your face, asking a genuine question. I truly believe that we are one question away from unlocking the meaningful friendships we've been looking for our whole life.
Yeah. Are you trying to reach your protein goals without the heavy, chalky, yucky, milky protein shakes? Well, guess what? I have something just for you. Meet my new favorite protein, Clear Protein Plus. This is the protein that thinks it's a lemonade. This protein gives you 20 grams of pure protein, zero sugar, and just 90 calories. I love it. It's delicious. It keeps me feeling energized, full, and there is zero bloat. And you guys, I gotta tell you, this is personal. I have known Casey with My Ultimate Edge my entire life. Yes, we grew up in that small town in Kansas together. I trust her. I have used her products for years, and I have seen real results. You guys have to go check out My Ultimate Edge. It is your full body wellness solution, from gut health to hormones to weight loss to protein to energy, and even a new NAD powered sleep routine. I promise you're going to love it as much as I do. Check out the show notes for a link to the Clear Protein Plus, as well as all the other products that I love. So I have this hilarious story about she's now a really good friend of mine. Our boys played baseball together.
Okay.
And Kara is like the most outgoing butterfly. She's the know-all too. Like if you ever want to know anything, I'm like, let me just call Kara Gillette. She's gonna know. Kara, I hope you're listening because I love you so much. But when I first met, she tells this hilarious story about when we first met, about how I actually was rude. Like, and I'm so embarrassed about the story. Now we laugh about it now.
Yeah.
So her husband came home and was like, oh, she was like, tell me about the moms. And this was like right around COVID or whatever. So there was some social distancing. I mean, at the baseball fields, people still didn't really care. But he's like, oh yeah, I think you're really going to like this one mom, Ben's mom, Tara. Like her and her husband seem so cool or whatever. So she comes to the next game. She's like, oh my God, hi, are you Tara? I'm like, hi. I was so like taken aback and like, and here she's just this outgoing person.
Yeah.
And I was like reclusive, and I mean, I talked to her and like we chatted a little bit, but because I wasn't like outgoingly, wildly, and I've literally had to become mindful of this when I meet people that I need to work on, like how sometimes when I first meet people, like out of the blue, out of nowhere, that I don't know why, but sometimes they feel like I'm not really approachable. Yeah. And I've literally become mindful of this, because the last thing that I ever want anyone to think is like I'm rude or right. I'm a snob or, I don't know. Like but it's interesting, and I am mindful of it. And of course she tells the story now and we're like besties. But I actually said, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I was being short. But I was.
I love this story, and I have a similar story. And the reason I love stories like this is because someone had the courage to share with you their first impression, because that was a blind spot to you. You didn't know that you were coming across like that. But because
right.
she had the courage to share that, now you made a very unlikely close friendship that you did not anticipate, because she
Kara,
chose.
Thank you for keeping me as a friend, even though I didn't make a great first impression.
But no, I'll match you. Okay. My current best friend and I almost never became friends at all, because we went to dinner, and I love asking people questions. This is my jam. Okay. So I was asking her questions. I was like, this is great. I'm getting to know so much about her. Kept asking her questions. I was like, the heck? She's not asking me any questions. We leave, and we both are like, not the best. Not sure if we'll ever hang out again. Come to find out, later she revealed, well, I wanted to ask you questions, but you literally didn't even let me breathe or leave any dead space in the air for me to ask you a question. So I just thought you didn't want to talk about yourself. And I was like, I am dead. I learned such a lesson in pacing and realizing that not everyone is like me, and not everyone is like us, and that the awkward silence isn't actually awkward at all. In fact, there's this study that shows that the average time it takes for us to respond to a question is 200 milliseconds. Here's the funny part. it takes your brain 400 milliseconds to form a thought. So we are quite literally most of the time talking without thinking. So,
Right.
so if you leave that space, that's also super important. But what we're talking about, an important concept really underneath of it all, is that don't put a box on what you think your friendships should look like and who they should look like. Because if your friendships are based on values and growing together, then you both might not like playing pickleball. Okay? That
Right.
might not be something you have in common, but you have something so much richer underneath of that. And that's what we have to focus on, is finding friends who have the same values that we want to embody and live out in our lives.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And I have become mindful of this. It's still not my personality to just strike up a huge conversation with someone. And my best
Sure.
friend in life, we met in college, and she actually said the same thing. She's like, we were both voice majors at the time, and I like did a solo in the class. And she came up to me after, she's like, "Oh my God, you did so good." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." And she's like, I'm like, "I'm Tara." And that was kind of it. And she was
Yeah.
like, but she wanted me to be like gushy,
Yeah.
and that's just not really my personality. But I've really tried to become more mindful about how do I present when I meet people, because maybe I'm the problem.
And that's amazing self-awareness, Tara, because I feel like so few of us actually get to that point of admitting there might be something about us we need to
Yeah,
change. But it all starts here. It all starts up here, actually, before we do anything else, and fixing the
right.
mindset, which you do such a great job of explaining and talking through and teaching people on your show. And body language is also important, which we often overlook as well. And so there's a couple like small hacks I like to teach people that can make you so much more warm and approachable
Okay,
to
teach
begin
me.
with.
Teach me.
So a couple of them is, when you're meeting someone, never cross your arms. I mentioned that briefly, but when you cross your
Yeah,
arms, it
I try not
actually,
to do that. Yes,
it tells our
try to
brain
show my
they're hiding
palms.
something.
Is it
Show your
Vanessa
palms.
Van Vanessa
Vanessa
Van
Van Edwards,
Van
her
Edwards? Yes,
I'm obsessed with her. She is the queen at body language, and so I've
yes.
studied a lot of her work. Second thing is a slight head tilt.
Okay.
And then if you do a flexed lid, so
Oh
you are
yeah,
squinting your eyes
and
like
and the three
closer,
nods.
a slow triple nod. And the reason I say all these three things is because this and this shows that you are intently listening and focused on the person in front of you. And when you do a slow triple nod, it actually has been shown to make people speak 67% longer, which is fascinating.
Okay.
But let me show you what happens if you don't do this. So Tara and I are talking, and I'm like, Tara is picking up, and if you're listening on audio, I'm nodding my head really quickly. Tara is picking up a cue that I'm not actually trying to say, but my cue is accidentally saying to her, "Hurry up, I have better things to do and pay attention to." So a slow triple nod shows someone, keep going. Like, I am in this with you. So those are a couple tips right there. Lengthening the distance between your shoulders and your ears so you're standing up straighter is showing someone that you're not only confident in yourself, you're confident in this conversation that you're having.
Okay.
Another thing, if you're sitting down, make sure your torso is facing towards the person. Because have you ever had a conversation with somebody and they're like, yeah, and their body's like facing the exact opposite way, and you're reading that as, "I'm sorry, are you trying to run away from me? Like, what is happening right now?" And we unknowingly do this because sometimes it feels more comfortable, but if you can face your torso towards someone, and I do this when I'm meeting people at the bar or having a bar conversation, and because it's really hard when you're sitting in a bar, you're both not facing each other. You have to turn your head.
Right.
So I will
And then it
turn
feels
my chair.
super intimate though if you like do that, because then you're like locking legs with them and you're like, whoa, this feels like sexual or something. I don't
So
know.
so I'll do like a 45-degree angle to not do the knee
The leg
touch.
lock. The knee.
The leg lock. Yes. But I'll turn it slightly so that people know, like, hey, like, you're my priority right now. And I think
Right.
what we also get wrong is that we think we have to death stare somebody and like not move our eyes around, because if you start moving your eyes around too much, people think, okay, cool, so you're not even paying attention to what I'm saying. And obviously
Right.
then you don't come across as safe and trustworthy. But you actually only need to be making eye contact with someone about 60 to 70% of the time. So as
Uh-huh.
long as you're not like tilting your head the other way, but you're kind of glancing off, here and there, that's totally acceptable and totally normal as well.
Okay. So, one of the things that I just said, and I think this is probably for a lot of people, I'm super confident in a professional setting. You
Yeah.
throw me in a setting where it's professional, I will show up confident,
Right.
talkative, engaging. There's something about being in social situations where they're not professional. It's just like, hey, you're not getting Tara Renze, speaker, author, emotional intelligence expert,
Yeah.
all that. You're getting
Yes.
just the girl Tara Renze.
I'm
I
just a girl.
I'm just a girl, but I am. But this is where it's hard for me, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people do have these crutches, and this is probably why there's this loneliness pandemic because we feel
Hmm.
safe in certain situations, but when we have to show up unapologetically authentic to who we are outside of our identity of a professional or work, it
Yes.
feels totally different.
No, I love that you're bringing it up because it's so true. And there's something where in a corporate setting, you get to come in with, how should I say this? Almost like a name tag of sorts, not a literal name tag, but like you come in and you're known. Like we can easily like have not even a chip on our shoulder, but the confidence of like, here's who I am, this is what I do. And you
Right.
know that in most circumstances, it's not going to expand outside of the bounds of that. So you feel like you're in control and can keep the conversation safe and contained because this is the identity attached to you. But obviously when we don't have that crutch, then it's like, oh my God, I'm so vulnerable right now. Like, what are people
Yes.
gonna think of me? Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That's exactly right. You are absolutely vulnerable, and that situation is uncomfortable. And the only way to get more confident is by embracing it and choosing to go first to get out of it and not waiting for somebody else to pull you out of it, but saying, okay, well, you know what? This is actually about to be really awkward. I might get shut down. I'll actually, we can talk about the thing I did for Bloomberg
Oh
shortly.
yeah, I want to bring that up.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about it now because it's a perfect segue.
Okay, so you kind of did like the cafeteria adult version of it though. You got messaged by Bloomberg that said, "Hey, we want to see how easy it is to go make friends." So you like ponied up at a bar, did alcohol, you did have
Yeah,
alcohol in your favor, okay? Like
that
people were drinking, which makes people more apt to,
it's
right? It
true.
does. It works. This is why people are like, "Well, if I go have one drink,
Yeah,
I feel like more relaxed to
yeah,
be open." But tell us about the
totally.
study and what you
Yeah.
found.
So they reached out to me and they said, hey, we want to know, give us some tips on how adults can make friends at a bar. So it was a very specific, isolated topic. And I was like, you know what? I'll do one better. I'm going to go to the bar, make friends, and make sure everything I'm telling you actually works. And
Okay.
so a lot of what I already shared, the body language techniques were employed, but the hardest thing right from the beginning was walking in, seeing a bar full of people and seeing one single chair open and being, oh God, that's
Yeah.
the chair I have to sit in because I'm coming here by myself. And I sat down in that chair, girl, and I brought a journal. And I'm gonna be honest, this was a crutch for me because I was like, I'm not gonna be on my phone. I'm not gonna be the person that escapes and looks like I'm unapproachable. Meanwhile, I like come with a journal, but I was doing it to take notes
I'm
in case I
dying.
needed to report to Bloomberg upon my
Yes, because you
findings.
were actually a reporter.
Yes, I'm doing my job here. So I sit down and I see these two guys sitting next to me, and they're watching a wrestling match on their phone. And then they're also watching a basketball game up above. So normally, this would be a situation where I would read as, do not get in a conversation with
Right.
these men because you do not take them away from sports. And because we're talking about body language, we can also read someone else's body language. If someone
Right.
else is on their phone, they're probably not interested. You can try, but
Mm-hmm.
don't expect them to be like, thank God I was hoping to talk to you. I don't want to be on this phone.
Right.
But so these guys were watching, and it was from the high school that I was part of. And I said, oh, is this the finals? And they were like, yeah, we started a conversation with that. But then he actually was wearing a cowboy hat, and it was more of an Indiana Jones hat. And I love Indiana Jones. And so I said, by the way, I love your Indiana Jones hat. like, first off, Indiana Jones is my favorite. What are you drinking tonight? Girl, we got into a 2-hour conversation because I went from a compliment to a question. We were talking about whiskey, then we were talking about family. I mean, this went down a whole thing all because I was curious and asked a
Right.
question that made him feel like I cared about him in some respect. And I don't want to say it's really that easy. I've been practicing this for now 15 years of my life, being put in uncomfortable situations. But what I can say is it's easy for me now because I put in all the reps. And what I want to tell people is that I often get pushback of, but I'm always the friend reaching out, like trying to hang out with people. To this day, 90% of the time, I'm still the person reaching out
Yeah.
and making plans. Does that make me desperate? No. I think that makes me intentional. And
I
it's
think so
teaching other
too.
people the same. Yeah.
My oldest son and his friend group, like the other moms have said, they're like, we are so grateful for Ben because Ben is the glue of this relationship. He's the one making the plans. He's the one saying, hey, let's all get together. Hey. And they were like, I don't think these boys would have still been friends because they all started, after middle school, they went to different high schools. And he is that glue. But I thought something interesting that you just said, and I've been thinking about this more and more, is that it's really finding some sort of a connection, right? Like a thread that ties you together.
Yes.
Because I had something really cool happen to me at a bar so Scott and I were like wasting time before like a baseball game or something, you know, where you drop the kid off and then you're like, oh, what are we going to do for an hour and a half? Oh, guess we'll go eat and drink at a bar. So we go, and usually we just try to sit up at the bar because it's faster and we get in. And so I sit down and there's this, older gentleman next to me, like my dad's age, maybe even a little bit older.
Okay.
And he has on a KU shirt. So I went to KU. So I'm like, hey, Rock Chalk. And he's like, oh yeah. And we started talking immediately about the basketball team. You know, there was like this thing, and then Scott chimed in or whatever. Well, that just started leading to other conversations. Oh, are you from around here? Did you go to the university? Oh, we live here now. So when I tell you what we uncovered in this 30-minute conversation, it's going to blow your mind. He said, yeah, we live over here in Lenex now. I'm like, oh, we live in Deer Creek. He's like, oh, Deer Creek. He's like, I used to live in Deer Creek. We're like, oh, okay. Now, Deer Creek's a pretty big subdivision, but it's old. Like, this place was built in the 80s. And the golf course behind us has been closed now for a couple of years. He's like, hey, what's happening with the golf course? And we're like, oh, I don't know. It's just been this major point of contention, of stress, whatever. We live on the hole. We live on the 6th hole. He's like, what? I said, yeah, we live on the 6th hole. He goes, I used to live there. He's like, my address was 13, and we just finished it together, 006. And he's like, I built that house that you live in.
What?
Yes. He built the house. I mean, he didn't build, he was the owner who designed and built the house. And so then we just had this amazing connection. He ended up sending us pictures of his family. We sent some. And it was just that, like, now, and it's become an epic story, right? But it was all finding that immediate connection of like rock chalk. So I was talking today with Joel Goldberg, who's the voice of the Royals. He's also a keynote speaker. He was on my podcast earlier on. And he talks a lot about trust, and he got his new video out, and there's a spot in it where he was talking about his relationship with one of the players, and it always felt strained, and this person just never really wanted to open up, and it made him feel insecure, whatever. And then finally, he asked him a question. He said, hey, what do you think about the Kansas City Royals? And he's like, or something like that. And he said, well, I can tell you this much. Kansas City is a great place to raise a family. And that question instantly, where then they had the family connection, created a connection that then built trust.
Absolutely.
That then opened up this door to where there was no longer this weird feeling. And that's really what it was all along. It wasn't about this guy was a jerk or intimidating. It was like they had never found a connection.
Yeah.
And it made me realize, I'm like, gosh, that's really where trust and relationships, it's all just finding that first connection, whether it's the Indiana Jones hat or the KU logo, or, that your kids both play on the same little league team, or you go to the same church, or something. Like you both like the special of the day, like better than anything. Like, I mean, it's that one little connection can make all the difference.
Exactly. And it's finding those Me Too opportunities. Mm-hmm. And there's this famous quote by C.S. Lewis that says, friendship is born the moment one man says to another, you too? I thought it was only me. Because a
Oh,
Me Too thing is like, oh, look, I'm exposing a little bit of myself and they can relate. What else? What else can we uncover together? And then it like gives us this dopamine hit. And then we're like excited to like explore someone else's life alongside of them. So I absolutely agree. And that's what we need to focus on in these. So a perfect setup, compliment a person, introduce yourself, ask a genuine question that you want to know about them. Boom.
mm-hmm.
And then you get to control where the conversation goes from there. Because there's been so many times where I have listened in on conversation and people just kind of like, oh, okay, that's so cool. And I'm like, you didn't want to know about why they got in law enforcement at 34 years old? Like having just
Right.
abandoned like I'm just like, we're just leaving questions on the table. Meanwhile, if you would have inquired a little bit more, I'm sure there's something that you could have found because,
Right.
you know, we all have so much in common, such as desiring meaningful connection in our lives.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think some people are just completely closed off and they're not even open? Like they're not like, okay, next, move on. Like,
Yes.
like, and how do we identify those people and then not take it personally? Like, oh, it was me. Like,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And you kind of have to have a sales mindset about it of like it's okay. They just weren't for me. Like they're just not the
mm-hmm.
person for me and I'm not for them. But you know what? We always have to keep in focus. Maybe not this time, but what about the next person? Like
Right.
I did 250 meal dates and the amount of best friends, close friendships that I gleaned from that was 3. Okay. Now you might think 1%, girl, I ain't going through all this. But here's the wild thing. I believe that you're worth building those meaningful friendships and we have to believe that too. There was a study done actually at the University of Kansas that showed that the amount of time it takes to go from acquaintance to friend, we're not even talking close friend, is 90 hours. Okay.
90 hours?
Now to go from acquaintance to best friend, super close friend, 200 hours.
Oh, wow.
So when we put it like that, we realize we actually have to weigh the cost of our time because
Mm-hmm.
that's what it'll take to get there. Now, obviously there's outliers. You can hit it off in 4 hours. You can't stop talking, then you want to go on a trip. Those are all outliers, but it's a good reference point to keep in mind when we're thinking of giving up because we spent 2 hours having lunch with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to do it a lot to get there and you're worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and meaningful relationships take time. They do. Like
Correct.
it's built on trust and connection, and it's just like not we just don't leave our door open for anyone to come in.
Right.
So I've got 2 things I want to ask you about before we have to wrap up the show.
Okay.
First off, let's talk about relationships with couples because I feel like this is a really hard thing. I'll meet a girl. I'm like, oh my God, I love you. We have so much fun together.
Yeah.
We're great. And then I'm like, my husband's like, oh God, are you setting me up on a double date with someone that, and I have to, but we get along so well that we're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
let's get together. And then we're like, ugh, we just don't love her husband. Or we're just not like, we don't
Yeah.
find that connection. Like, just so this is a real thing, like for couples. It's like, how do you find, like, how hard is it to find couples that you like? It's a gold mine. Like, it's just great. Like, I feel like this, and I do feel like this is one thing that impedes relationships in our adult years.
Yeah, no, I think you're bringing up a great point, and I do think it's really hard to find that. And it's made me think through why are we putting the pressure on ourselves to need that? I understand if we want to go like on a trip, like a couples trip, that's one thing. But there's new studies and research coming out showing that the key indicator of a marriage going the distance, especially in years 6, 7, if you get past that, the number one predictor of your success is how close of a friend you are with your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because our friendship with a spouse can be different with the friendship with a friend because they're both bringing separate things to the table. And so I know like men are always the ones who get shafted because the women get so close and you're like, come on, you gotta match our energy because we're up
Yeah.
here. And they're
Your
like,
husband likes baseball? My husband likes baseball.
right.
Like,
Oh my God, they'll be best friends. Meanwhile, they're like, cool, we'll like watch a game together and not talk for 2 hours, which is fine. But I think it's just thinking through like what are you each looking for in
yeah.
friendship, and instead of like defaulting our spouse and like setting them up for like you guys should totally hang out and be friends, what if we take a more organic approach and like, hey, I really like this person, I really want to make it a priority to spend time with them, because you choosing to spend time with friends outside of your spouse is not a detriment to your marriage, it's a strength.
Right.
Because you're
right.
not putting all your eggs in one basket expecting your spouse to be that for you.
Yeah. I know that Scott and I, we have a handful of people that we like meet up for dinner with them. And what's interesting is we actually are close with them as like, we're the four of us are friends,
Okay.
but I don't get together with her one-on-one and Scott doesn't get together with it. Like we forge these great like couple friendships.
Yeah.
Generally speaking though, like Scott, people say like, oh gosh, you and Scott always travel by yourself. I'm like, yeah, we just want to be together. Like he is my best friend. And
Yeah.
I have noticed that a lot of the marriages of people that we know that their marriages have failed, they never went out alone. They never went out to dinner together. There was always another couple. They were always either going out with someone, meeting up with someone. Like we were, and it was obvious. It was like they never just go out, the two of them.
Yeah, they didn't kindle their relationship alone. Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I think that's such a great point. Yeah.
Okay, final question. This is a big one.
I feel like I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
You cannot phone a friend.
Dang it.
Okay, final question. And this may, I'm just going to ask it. Do you talk to people on airplanes?
It depends on what time of the day the flight is. If I get a flight after 8 a.m., I will make small talk with the person next to me and gauge what they're looking for. Because I found that most people on airplanes nowadays are like, please just give me my time alone, which is ironic because it's like, this is the one time you're not in your house and now you don't want to talk to people, you know? So I gauge it based on how open and warm the body language of the other person is with me.
Right. Okay. We're on the same page. I do the same thing. Like, I don't always talk to people on planes. I usually gauge it, like, do they have headphones in? Like, you can tell instantly, like, if someone wants to talk. I actually I'm not often a talker on a plane. Like, I I'm usually traveling for work.
Totally.
So I'm in the zone of, like, really trying to get dialed in to wherever I'm going to speak.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon that I will have that conversation before takeoff, of like,
Yes.
oh, hey, and I've made some really amazing connections actually with people that way. But but then I always respect, and they always respect mine. Like, okay, now we're going to take off. And then there might be a little more talk at the end.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I remember I got in a conversation lately because I had an evening flight. So, I'm like, I'm out here for the conversation. Mm-hmm. And this guy was like ready to talk. Yeah. Like he was giving the posture of, thank God someone notices me because I'm not able to really talk to people often.
Right.
And because I thought about it through that lens, instead of being like, oh my God, he's so annoying, will he please shut up and leave me alone? I was like, you know what? I need to take the opportunity to make him feel like he matters. Because he does. Yeah. And if it takes one person revealing that to you and it changes how you see yourself, then that's all that matters to me at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you made him feel, we had a lady sitting next to us on a flight. She was an older lady and she really wanted to talk. And we talked to her a little bit, and then we talked to her like kind of mid-flight when we got our drinks, and then we talked to her a little bit more, but she would have talked the whole flight. Yeah. Now her husband was sitting behind us, and him and the girl next to him, they talked the whole flight, the entire flight.
So that's normal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for those two, like it was a match made in heaven. They were the talkers, the meter uppers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. It is interesting, but I think I try and think about it like this. Even if it's in the morning, I try and think about it like this. How can I make people around me feel like they matter? Like I consider that almost my civic duty of sorts, because I know what's going on. I know the statistics. This is what I do. Like my whole mission in life is to make people feel like they matter and that they're
Mm-hmm.
worth building incredible friendships. And so I just so deeply have that desire for all of us to live with a mindset of, this world is so much bigger than me. How can I be the light in somebody else's day today?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it just means making eye contact and being like, how is your morning? And they're like, oh, I've been up since 4 a.m. Whoa, when's your shift done? Like, sounds
Yeah.
like you're going to hit the head, just we make
So
it
true.
so hard on ourselves when it doesn't need to be. If the
Mm-hmm.
goal is making other people feel like they matter is the gateway to building meaningful friendships, then okay, it seems like we know the very next step to take.
Yeah. Well, in our lifetime, we actually come face to face with 80,000 people that you can have that little connection with. That, like, hi, hey, how
Wow.
are you? I love your hat. Whatever it is, the smile, even that small dose of positivity, of love, we know it can change someone's life. It really can. And just make
Yes.
them feel seen and like completely shift their attitude and mindset. So I have loved having you on the show. I feel like we could continue this conversation for hours, but why don't you
I
tell
agree.
everyone like what you're up to? You're a speaker, you're a podcaster. How do they find you? How do they invite you to come talk to their people? Like
Yeah.
give us all the skinny.
Thank you. Yeah. So I love speaking to all humans in business, elsewhere, churches, anywhere, because we're in a loneliness epidemic and it's impacting how we live and it's impacting our work. I mean, don't get me started on a tangent of the impacts of loneliness in the workplace. And my whole goal is making people understand the impact of deep, meaningful connection and how it can change your life forever. I mean, the longest study, the Harvard study, I won't go on a tangent, promise, but the 85-year study showed that the number one predictor of how long of a life and how happy of a life you'll live was not how healthy you ate, how much you worked out. It was actually the quality and depth of the relationships in your life. So this is actually one of the most important things we can do for our own bodies, health, mindset. All of it stems back to the depth of our relationships. So this is just what I love talking about all day long. I have a YouTube channel called Accidentally Intentional. Be sure to follow, subscribe, as the goal there is to help adults break through surface level connection and build those meaningful friendships. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Zoe Asher, Instagram, the same, and of course, zoeasher.com for all the other things. Tara, you are a great friend in my life. Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to do this
Oh,
again. We need a part 2.
I love you. And I'm so glad our paths crossed at the Dave Ramsey event back in
Yeah,
2021. And you know what's really interesting? We did form we met, we chatted, but it wasn't like it was like this instant like, but we kept following each other. And I think that's
right.
the power of relationships is like you never know when that person's going to enter back into your life and make a
Exactly.
huge impact. And you definitely have done that with me. Zoe has helped me produce the show, get the show running. She is my just whiz behind the scenes. I drive her absolutely nuts. And,
Not true.
I'm like, oh, she's like, your camera's not working. I'm like, oh. So I spend 20 minutes trying to get it to work. I'm like, oh, I had the lens closed.
But listen, when you have a message as good as Tara's, you are along for the ride with her.
Okay. Well, it's a mutual love affair. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Be Who You Came to Be podcast. Go give Zoe a follow, reach out to her. And in the meantime, spend a little bit of time over the next 24 hours making at least 3 positive connections and report back to us. Let us know what happens. Thanks for
Let's go.
listening. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.